My name is Sylvia Paris Drummond. I'm the CEO for the Delmore Daye Learning Institute. The Viola Desmond Community Talks series carries on Viola's legacy of entrepreneurship, education, and social action, inspiring the leaders in all of us.
The pardon is the core of everything that came after. I was really surprised when I sit here and I'm talking to you and I feel it over that after that pardon, the tears are welling in my eyes. After that pardon, all these accolades came, and I'm surrounded by them, and I wish my mom was here, my dad, but anyway, and Viola herself, but it's amazing. I'm talking to you, and I can feel the welling up of amazement, if that can be said, because there's so many things have come along with this pardon, with Viola and her story.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Viola Desmond Community Talks. I'm your host, Dr. Kesa Monroe Anderson, and it's my pleasure to invite today our former Lieutenant Governor, Her Honor, Dr. Mayanne Francis, to the Community Talks this evening. And Dr. Francis, we welcome you. Thank you for joining us.
It's a great honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. It is a wonderful opportunity for us to talk about a phenomenal woman in Canadian history, African Canadian history, and more specifically, African Nova Scotian history.
Absolutely.
So I look forward to all that you will share about your thoughts on this wonderful woman, Viola Desmond. So first of all, could you tell us from your perspective, Your Honor, who was Viola Desmond? And why is her legacy so important for us today?
Well, Viola Desmond, for me, is a very special person. She was a person who is dynamic. She was a person who was extremely intelligent. She was a person who clearly had a lot of courage. She was somebody who was also, I would consider, compassionate and caring. But Viola was the woman who was wrongly accused because she sat in the white-only section of a theater in New Glasgow. And with that being wrongly accused, of course, led to a free pardon to clarify what happened for her, to let it be known that she was innocent. Unfortunately, that took over 10, 20 years before it was actually realized that this person was innocent. Because what happened to her in 1946, and it wasn't until 2010 that the free pardon took place. But this was a woman that we all need to know, regardless of what our color is, because Viola was clearly a person that I would call a Canadian hero.
Yes, I agree. And so why do you believe it's important for us to know about Viola Desmond's legacy in the full? Many of us know about what happened to her in 1946 at the Roseland Theater. But why is it important for us to know about her in the full?
I think it's important to know about her, all about her, because she was a woman from way back in that time. You would not be expecting a Black person, to have all of the talents and intelligence and the vision that she had. People see her as an activist, but she was beyond that. She was an entrepreneur, a very successful entrepreneur. She was also an educator, a successful educator. Yes. She was also, and I was reading about her, she also had a bit to do with real estate. Wow. So this is interesting because this is a woman that was well-rounded. Yes. And what happened to her at the theater, that took courage. to say that, no, I want to sit here because I have poor eyesight. I want to sit closer to the screen, and then she's dragged out and put into jail. So we need to listen to that story, know who she is, going back to 1946, and then look at 2020 and say, have things changed? Are we experiencing some of these things too? But with Viola, because there's so much to her life, so many aspects of her life, she will be talked about forever. And that's good.
Definitely.
That is good.
Definitely. She has left a lasting impression on our lives, indelible impression.
She'll be inspirational.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So when we think about, we're going to get more into Viola Desmond as the educator, Viola Desmond as the businesswoman, the successful businesswoman. But I'd like to just take us back just to a few moments ago where you spoke about your role in freeing Viola, so to speak, as a Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia in 2010. Could you tell us, because you were very instrumental in that posthumous free pardon, why is that so significant? And when we look at the free pardon from a social justice lens, what is the significance of that?
Well, when we look at the free pardon from the social justice lens, it's clear that many people do not understand the difference of a free pardon and a regular pardon.
Right.
And in that sense, every time you hear somebody say Viola Desmond was pardoned, you have to stop them and say, no, she received a free pardon, because the free pardon is only granted to people who are innocent. And a regular pardon, is somebody who's committed a crime, guilty, served their time, now they're going to have a pardon. So, and in some ways, it's kind of good when they get that confusion, because it forces you to go and do some research and find out more, and then the conversation starts.
That's right.
But going on it happened on April the 15th, 2010. That was clearly a very historic day. And it was an interesting event for many reasons. And one of the things I will do after I talk a bit is I want to read the apology, parts of the apology that the government gave at the time, which would have been Premier Dexter.
Yes.
And it was just some interesting words that were used that day, and also was Minister Percy Paris was there as well, the Attorney General, and so forth. So the background for all of that is that the Attorney General was actually approached by the mayor and councillors that they wanted to have this matter dealt with because this took place in our city and it was wrong. Yes. So, I'll read a little extra of that as well. So in order for it to come to me, because the only person that can give the royal prerogative of mercy free pardon is Queen Elizabeth II, or her representative. So obviously Queen Elizabeth's representative was me. Yes. So I was briefed by the Attorney General. I was briefed by all the people who came and sat and talked to me about this and gave me time to reflect on it. I didn't have to reflect too long because I knew that this was appropriate for her. And so when it was agreed that I agreed, I said yes. So the recommendation would come from the cabinet. The Attorney General makes a recommendation to the cabinet. It was approved. So the date was set, and it was truly amazing. So I just want to, and this is a book that was written by Viola's sister.
Yes.
And in here, at the appendix, they added in here the apology and a full explanation of the royal prerogative of mercy. They have the words that were used by Percy Paris, the words used by Ross Landry, who was the Minister of Justice, and then Darrell Dexter himself. So Ross Landry said that Mrs. Desmond was an innocent woman. In 1946, the Crown made an error. Now the Crown, we're talking the prosecutor's office, right? And the time has come to right the wrong. So there you go. And this was a clear case of racism that should have never occurred. And the time had come to do something about it. Now that was just a piece of what he had to say. Yes. And then Minister Paris, he said, a law that at that time was common public policy, a law that stated without words but with opinions and with attitudes that she and her brothers and her sisters of African descent belonged to a group of less thans. Okay? Percy Paris said that. And then he said that Viola Desmond dared to challenge the status quo. She refused to stay silent. She dared to ask questions and dared the greater community to accept her and all men and all women of African descent as equals.
Yes, absolutely.
I thought that was, but when the premier spoke, I thought it was interesting when he said the arrest, detainment, and conviction of Viola Desmond is an example in our history where the law was used to perpetrate racism and racial segregation. This is contrary to the values of Canadian society. Then he said, we recognize today that the act for which Viola Desmond was arrested was an act of courage and not offense, not an offense. So I thought it was, those words were very powerful. So it was, and he said Viola Desmond was prosecuted, not because she committed an offense, but simply because of her race.
Yes. So righting of the wrongs.
Yes, and that's what it is. And then he said that her legacy, it was interesting when I read this part about that, when he said that, he quoted the words of Nelson Mandela. It's about her free pardon, but he said, here it is. She said, Nova Scotia cannot and should not forget. Instead, her courage will serve as a reminder for all Nova Scotians to be vigilant and strong against racism in all its forms. That is Viola Desmond's legacy.
Powerful legacy it is.
No, he didn't quote Nelson Mandela. That was me. I didn't.
But absolutely, I believe that there's so much that we can still hear echoed in those words today in terms of Viola Desmond as challenging the status quo. Some see her as a woman of agency, as a woman of influence, powerful change, a woman of action, a self-determined woman, a powerful woman. We see her as a woman of resistance as well as innovation, and not in terms of, what happened to her, but also who she was even before that incident at the Rosen Theater. So do you agree with
absolutely?
That description?
She was born into a great family. They were a very strong family, and a family that was very close, because her dad had a barbershop.
Yes, that's
right. And it was only when he became employed with the post office that her brothers took over the barbershop. So that in some ways is an influence for her in terms of her entrepreneurship. But then the mother was also somebody who was extremely strong she wrote a lot. She wrote articles in newspapers if she saw things that were not right. She would write about it. So they were a strong family in all of that. And then she herself, Viola, in her education, she was top of her class.
Yes,
I think it was Bloomfield School she went to. She was top of her class in there, but she was somebody who still always kept reading, always kept learning. So even though she was at the top of her class, and after that, she took tests so that she can be a teacher.
Yes, that's right.
And so she taught, I think, in Preston and Hamlin's Plains, but at the same time, she was still reviewing things and the influence of Madam J.C. Walker. She was doing those things. But even before all of this, before she got into her entrepreneurship, she looked out for her younger sister, which was Wanda. So whenever there was a challenge in school because Wanda's color of her skin, Wanda didn't go home and complain about it. It was something that Viola and her mother found out by accident, and then go and talk to the school teacher, and then straightened it out. So she was, I don't know if she would call herself an activist. I think that she saw if something was wrong, we speak up.
That's right.
And if that is wrong only because of the color of your skin or because you're a woman, she's speaking up. So she was doing all this long before we would get names and say feminist on her, but she was, right? She was a very caring person about individuals, about, why are we being treated this way? And also, even Wanda has told the story many times about, remember Wanda when her and her husband were divorced or something
Yes.
like that. She had these children, and she was in the States, and she wasn't having proper food and rent and everything. Who spoke up for her? Who went and stood before the municipal council to say, how dare you do this to my sister? And that same day, she gets the money and she gets the food, etc. So she was somebody who I said, she just looks at if you're impacting human beings negatively, she was going to do something about it. And she did. So she was a very courageous and caring and compassionate person. And we didn't even get into the entrepreneurship yet.
No, we'll get into that right after this break. We'll be right back. Thank you. Welcome back, folks. We're having an invigorating discussion about courageous, phenomenal Viola Desmond. And I'm being joined by Her Honor herself, former Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia, Dr. Mayanne Francis. And as we continue this discussion, Dr. Francis, and I reflect on the fate of Viola Desmond in 1946, when she was dragged out of that theater, that racist incident that took place. When we think about what happened to Viola Desmond then, could you compare her fate at that time to some of the incidents that are happening here in Nova Scotia right now in 2020?
Unfortunately, I can. When I first became aware of the incident that took place at Walmart with Satina Rayo, my first thought, Viola Desmond. And I'll tell you why, because I'll tell you about the parallels. First of all, you have the owners, the managers or whoever, calling the police for a black woman. And the difference with the situation here in Nova Scotia was this is a black woman with her 2 children shopping. The other one was a black woman who was sitting in a white-only section. And as we all know, shopping while black is an issue. A lot of people don't want to admit it, but it is. And then you had the Viola Desmond was dragged out of the movie theater. She had some injuries and her shoes came off in the theater and so forth, and then she's thrown in jail and she's there for, I think it was one night or many hours anyway. And so then when you look at what happened here with Satina Rayo, she's on the ground and she's, she's fighting off the police and they're fighting her. And then somebody would argue, well, she fought the police off. Well, she was trying to first off protect her children and protect herself. I can't sit here and say that I'm somebody who, I don't like violence, but at the same time, I don't know how I would respond if somebody dragged me or tried to touch my child, which I do not have children, so I'll say, if they try to go after my cat, then I would really say something. That's the closest for me to say that. But in any event, I saw those parallels because, first of all, why were the police called in both instances? Okay, fortunately for the situation here at the Walmart, she was charged, but she was not prosecuted. At the same time, however, the report by CERC, who said that she was guilty of, although I should say that the police were found not guilty of abusing her, etc. But if you read the report, you cannot help but question the type of investigation that took place. And you also cannot help but question the way it was written. It was so negative about her that you have to just sort of shake your head, because I keep thinking when I was reading it, I was saying, really stereotype of what they consider black women to be like. And it was just a very disturbing report to read that you can't help but question. When I see what happened to her and her children, I can't help but wonder about the psychological damage that is done not only to her, but to those children. They witness this by their mom, happening to their mom. What does that mean for them 10, 15, 20 years from now? Is it still there in the back of their head? What does that mean? So those are things that I worry about for the children. I worry about for her as well, because she has to live with that at the same time, manage her children and hope for them. So all of that brings into such situations that you worry about the future of the three of them. Okay? And at Viola, when I think of what was the psychological impact on Viola, because even though she, from what I was reading, she tried to continue with her business, but she didn't. And the question is, why? Because you understand, with all this, it was in the newspapers, and she defrauded the government, and, you know, so all of this wasn't her personality to get that attention, that impact, and it also affected her marriage. Okay? So there was also, people do not understand that the negative impacts of racism and discrimination, and I know there's studies out there that will show, that have demonstrated, and I think Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard has done some research on that, and there's a lot of research that's been done in the United States in terms of the negative impacts psychologically of racism and discrimination. Okay? And so I do not have any evidence that this is what happened to Viola, but you can't help but ask, how come when she was so successful, she not only had the beauty business started, but she started schools where they could study. She created her own products. She had everything. And she also had a little bit of real estate. So this was a woman who was clearly an entrepreneur with a vision, and she was a constant learner because she often traveled to Montreal or to New York to learn more, and then when she learned it, she came back with it. And what I loved about what she was doing, she was also influencing the people that she was working with, the other black women, to encourage them to, you can start your own business too. So that's what I mean. She wasn't selfish. She said, you can start your own business, you know, start it all over, because black women at the time really couldn't go anywhere to get their hair done. And then I'm pretty certain that some of that is still current today, 2020. It's still current today, absolutely. It's real, yeah. And fortunately, there are some black women now who are influenced by her, and they have their places, and they're very good and exciting. But you know, it's still, I mean, I think it's great. It's wonderful, because when I lived in the States, that's where I always go to black hairdressers and so forth. And the other thing about Viola, which I just loved, is that she learned how to make wigs. Yeah, so I thought that was exciting too, you know. Yeah, she was just nonstop. And so, but what happened after that incident? That's the big question.
Yes, I think about, the humiliation that incident must have caused her, and caused her to have a broken spirit. That did definitely impact her, as you said, and also her family, so other relationships that are extended, her extended family, her relationship with her spouse, and then also her business. And we don't know exactly what caused her to, or we don't know if this situation had a direct impact on the fact that she died at the age of 50, but that is very young, even at that time. And so we can't help but wonder. So Dr. Francis, do you believe, have we learned from this situation? Because if we're connecting a 1946 incident to a 2020 incident, have we learned, and what can we learn from Viola Desmond?
Well, we can learn so much from Viola Desmond. The question is, are we opening our minds to really accept what has happened? And we have to also open our minds and stop saying that, well, it's not like that today. Yes, it is. With the murder of George Floyd in May, and and other, there's many other matters, but this came up. And also with COVID-19, in terms of, it showed that the impact of this disease had a higher number on people of color and Black people, not just in the States, also here, from what I understand. And so, you know, you have to accept the fact, okay, it's real. And you also have to accept the fact that it does have a psychological impact. There may be some of us who can handle it a little bit better, but still bothers us. But there's some who have not, especially with the degree of it, right? So for me, it's still real in terms of what we're seeing here, even in our province, with the justice system. You can see how driving while Black is a big issue. You know, it could be just walking down the street while Black, especially if you're walking in an area that they don't think you should be walking down the area. That still happens, and nobody wants to accept that, but it is real, and that's the nervous part and the scary part, because this is 2020, and what I think about now is what's going to happen with the next generation. You know, what are they going to go through? And I think the positive part of that is when the George Floyd's death and the people who were upset about it clearly was an interracial group around the world. And they were younger people. They were much young people. And so it made you sit back and say, okay. You know, so we have major issues. I'm not saying that we cannot start resolving these things, but we have to make sure that we're doing it from the heart and we're serious about it and it's going to be sustainable. Okay, and we first have to understand what systemic discrimination is. We have to understand what unconscious bias is. We have to understand what, you know, all of those terms we have to know, microaggression and so forth. We have to know all of that, because if we don't know them, you're not going to be able to bring up solutions.
And we have so many stories that we can turn to, like Viola Desmond's story, to learn. But we will continue this conversation just in a few minutes, and we will be right back. Welcome back to the Viola Desmond Community Talks. I'm continuing this conversation with our former Lieutenant Governor, Her Honor, Dr. May Ann Francis. And Dr. Francis, I would like for us to look at Viola Desmond as the businesswoman, the successful pioneer, the visionary entrepreneur. Who was Viola, the entrepreneur?
Yeah. Well, I admire her for that, because I said, I don't know if I could ever have done something like that. But what I love about what she did, first of all, it's her determination.
Yes.
Okay? And she was influenced by just reading about Madam J.C. Walker, who was the first millionaire, multimillionaire in the United States. And she was influenced by that. I mean, you know, just think about that. And here, we're going back to the 1930s here. But in any event, that did not stop her, because she knew by doing that, she was not only going to be helping herself, she's helping all the Black women.
Yes.
Right? And some Black men, because she did make things for Black men as well. So, you know, and what I loved about it is that when she went to New York to study this, she studied at the school that was created by Madam J.C. Walker. It was named after the daughter.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, that's where she studied for that part, and she also did some work, I think, in Montreal as well. Then she comes right back, and it's like she had all this confidence, which she did. She sets up this her place, right, in the North End here. And then she also, I mean, she outgrew that and had to do a bigger place. She also started a school so that there'll be training and for the Black women to learn. As I said, they can do their own.
Amazing.
And so she was somebody who was a non-stop. And then I think when she was so interested in terms of doing things that would make Black people happy. That's where I just mentioned about she developed wigs and everything else too. Because I think even she had her mother help her do some sewing. I think part of that as well. So that's truly amazing. So this was back in the 30s, and that's where she was. So in all that, I'm sure was the influence of Madam J.C. Walker. Now, in terms of herself, I mean, has she influenced others? I would say she actually did.
Yes.
A very close friend of mine who passed away, unfortunately, at a young age, at 59, Beverly Maskell. Beverly Maskell was born in Fall River, and she moved off to Toronto probably I don't know, when she was in 17 or 18, something like that. So she was living in Toronto for all those years. And the first time I heard Viola's name was from Beverly Maskell.
Okay.
And I lived in Ontario in the late 90s, and it was Beverly who told me about that. And I met Beverly here when she was brought here to do a speech, and I was on the same agenda. And as soon as we met, we became friends. And when she told me about Viola Desmond, and that was incredible, and you should see how successful Beverly was. And I talk about Beverly in my book, and Beverly was just, her personality was almost very similar to Viola's, okay? Beverly had friends all over, she was on numerous boards, and if Viola had continued with her, she would have ended up, I'm convinced, sitting on boards as well. It just was because that's what happened to Madam J.C. Walker. And also Bev was able to have her own businesses too. I mean, besides the beauty business, but she had that influence.
Yes.
So I think that Viola can still have that influence on people right now.
Absolutely.
And she does on various people. Miss Williams, her name is Christian Williams, and she's the CEO of the Junior Chamber, right? And so she's the one that recommended that Viola be inducted into the Business Hall of Fame, which is important because when she first saw Viola's portrait in Government House, she was mesmerized by her and did all this research on her, including her own doctorate degree. So, Viola influences people, and now she's on the $10 bill. She'll be talked about forever, and that's what's important.
Very important.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that and those stories. And I think about the connections, and specifically for Black women everywhere. And reciprocity is a word that comes to mind because Viola was influenced by Madam C.J. Walker. Then Viola went on to influence Beverly Maskell, and you're telling us that Beverly Maskell influenced you.
Yeah,
and how many people have you influenced? So I think about the life and the legacy of Viola Desmond as being that gift that keeps on giving and inspiring us. I think about that woman. She was so amazing, and as you said, at age 32, she had her own business. So she had Vi's Studio of Beauty Culture, and she also had her own school, the Desmond School of Beauty Culture, and her own line of beauty products for men and for women. She was an independent woman outside the box when we think about what was expected of women at that time. You know, Black women specifically were expected to fill roles of servitude. So when we think about Viola Desmond, specifically within the beauty industry, Dr. Francis, how would you describe the social justice impact of Viola's work within that beauty industry?
I would say it's very powerful, and I really would hope that the industry would see we have some shortcomings, right? Maybe we should be looking at encouraging and helping Black women to set up shops that would encourage that would automatically have Black women come there and feel they're comfortable. Because I mean, I've gone into shops, not to get my hair done, but that were not black, and I never felt comfortable. Usually for my nails, and I haven't gone back. So you know, the type of things. It's the feeling of being comfortable, and I compare the feeling of when I lived in Ontario or I lived in the United States, and when I go into shops in black, I'm very comfortable. I can kick off my shoes, and I think I talk about that in the book where I had my shoes off and I was getting my hair braided, and what's his name came in, anyway, somebody came in who was well known, and he flicked my toe and he said, "Oh, sorry about that," you know, that type of thing. But I was just so relaxed, sitting back like that, right?
Feeling at home.
So you know, so it's feeling comfortable. I'm not saying everybody kicks off their shoes, but I mean, when you get your hair braided, you know how many hours that takes, right? So anyway, so it's about being comfortable, and I think that is something that we should be doing, and I would love to see the beauty industry talk about that. See, the interesting piece about us as black women, we would be able to do everybody's here.
That's right. That's right.
Doesn't matter if you're black or you're white or you're Hispanic, we will do everybody's here. But that's not the way it is now.
Right, exactly.
For the current salons,
that's right.
But we would be able, the door is open for anybody to come in. We will be able to do your hair, but our specialty is on black hair, but we still know how to do your hair as well.
Thank you. Which leads me to
Harry
my...
Belafonte, that's who I was trying to use.
Oh, wow. Wow. So that leads me to the next question, which is focusing on Viola Desmond, the educator. So she was an educator in numerous respects, numerous ways. Could you tell us about Viola Desmond, the educator, and even in terms of what you just mentioned, the gaps that were existing at that time in the beauty industry, and how she filled those gaps in the beauty industry in terms of her service to black women and black people in general. But she did a similar thing in terms of her role as an educator in that business as well. Can you tell us about it?
Well, that's another, I mean, I admire her altogether, but there's certain things that stand out even more. Like, I'm somebody who firmly believes continue learning, okay? And it doesn't necessarily mean get 10,000 degrees. It just means keep learning.
Yes.
And that's what she did.
Lifelong
Don't
learner.
forget, she went to high school, then she went off to get her write some exams so she could be a school teacher. Then while she was a school teacher, she was being influenced by what she was reading about
Madam C.J. Walker. Yes.
So, you know, so she was somebody and always educating. And then when she got into the beauty business, she started educating in that. But how do I make new products? So she's learning about that. How do I encourage other people to also take on things like this? So she was creative. And she had that strong sense that education was important. She even influenced her sister Wanda in terms of education. Everything was about be proud. And there's a quick little story I'll tell you about Wanda when, I forget what grade she was in, but anyway, the teacher kept her at the back of the class because she's black, sit at the back of the class. But Wanda was also a very brilliant woman as well.
Yes.
And she led the class in a particular test. So they had to bring her up front because the top people were sit up front. And then the teacher was like, oh, well, maybe she's just too brilliant for us, so we'll send her to the next class. So, because she would never answer her questions whenever she raised her hand. So there was something going on at the school, and in comes Viola and her mom. And Wanda gets sent back to the other class at the back of the class. And so Viola said, why are you at the back of the class when you're top level? And she finally told her the story. So Viola said, really? So anyway, the next day Wanda's back at the front of the class.
Of course.
So, you know, she said to Wanda, you need to be strong of who you are. This is educating. So she was a very strong promoter of education, and I want our people today, our youth, to understand education is so important.
That's right.
And to look to Viola as a role model and a leader. Okay? Look to her as a role model and a leader. Would you want to start your own business? Would you want to be a teacher? Would you want to be a doctor or a lawyer? And I always say, even if you want to be a janitor, be the best janitor that's ever known. Okay? So
be
whatever
self-determined.
Be self-determined, and whatever it is, be perfect at it.
That's right.
That's the whole point.
Be excellent at it. Viola was
Absolutely.
excellent. Whatever
My
she put her hands
Yeah,
to.
my father always said that if you want to be a janitor, he said, you make sure people question you on how do I do that? You know, how do I make that floor so clean? You know, that type of thing. So just be proud of what you're doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think about, you know, we talk about her as the educator, and I wonder how much of that was by chance or by choice, and how much of that was by necessity when we think about the times. And you mentioned the systemic discrimination of those times earlier on, as well as the systemic discrimination we're still experiencing now when we think about the fact that she had to leave her home province to gain training because there was no school, no beauty school that accepted Black students at that time.
Right.
And she left for Montreal, and then she also left the country altogether for Atlantic City, I believe it was, in New York, to study there as well. So how would you describe her dedication to education? And I think about the time that we're currently living in, which is one where we hear people across the country, education systems across the country, talking about this achievement gap with Black students, and how do we close the achievement gap, and grappling with that. But Viola Desmond, she stepped in and she filled a gap in a historic way, in a visionary way. And she filled that void for Black women through the beauty profession. Can you just tell us a little bit about that, and maybe what that means to us today as we reflect on what she did then in 1946?
I think looking at her, you should see strong, dedicated, high self-esteem woman who knew that she was living in an era of racism and discrimination like we are today.
Yes.
But she said, we're going beyond that. I know what to do to make us feel good. I know what to do to make us be independent. So this was her self-esteem. I would see that strong self-esteem. And the fact that she knows it can be done.
Right.
She saw Madame Walker, so she figures, well, she did it, I could do it too. But she had that confidence in herself, and plus she was also very smart.
Yes.
She was a very bright woman. She had the support of her family, which was very good. So what she was doing was supporting the people she's encouraging. See what I'm saying? And she was happy about it, and she was making it show that we need to do this, and this is a great thing to do. But I saw this as her confidence, her courage, her love of self, and love of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She gave us hope.
Absolutely.
She continues to give us hope.
She is.
And she's taught us that there's nothing that we cannot do when we put our minds to
Exactly.
it. And that we can take control of our own lives as well through what she did through the beauty industry and through her beauty school. Well, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back in a few moments. Thank you. Welcome back to the Viola Desmond Community Talks, sponsored by the Delmore Daye Learning Institute. We're continuing this conversation, learning more. I'm learning more about Viola Desmond and her impact, her influence, which has been phenomenal through the years, even since her passing, and we continue to learn so much about her and from her. And Dr. Francis, I'm reflecting on the contributions, the many contributions that Viola Desmond made to the beauty industry, both through the fact that she was a businesswoman and a very successful one at that, as well as an educator and starting her own beauty school. And I'm reflecting on her ability to define and affirm and redefine Black beauty. and how that would have been revolutionary at that time. And when I even think about where the times that we're living in today, we're still not seeing reflections, positive reflections of Black beauty in the way that we should so many years later. So please tell us, how did she use her business to define, to affirm, and to redefine Black beauty?
That's a very interesting question. And I only could speculate because, not having met her, obviously.
Yes. Yeah.
But I can speculate in terms of, again, I said earlier about this is a woman who was very proud of who she was, that she was a proud Black woman.
Yes.
And I believe that when you feel this way, you are encouraged to make others feel that way, whether it's through business, as she has, or it could be, you could be a teacher in a school.
That's right.
And so you could be talking to Black children and letting them know you're just as valuable and you are just as smart, right? Or it could be in some other profession. It could be in the nursing, it could be in a doctor, it could be an engineer, it could be in science. But you're encouraging people to have the courage and feel proud of who you are. Yes, you're going to face some barriers, but that does not mean that you can't climb over those barriers and be strong and be good. And it also does not mean that there aren't people that can support you and help you through that.
That's
so you
right.
have to show that confidence. And the other part that I would say that she was doing was, whenever she saw that there was something missing with the Black women in her business, she went out and did some research on it and came back and did it. Like when I said she did the wigs, she did
Yes,
that. And there were other things that she discovered, like apparently when she was making the powder, she knew how much to mix in because of the color of our different complexions,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So she was on top of all of that, and not to make anybody feel less than.
That's
Everybody
right.
felt just as important. And so I think that is something valuable about her. And she had, and just the fact that she was doing this, that she influenced other people right up to today.
That's right.
Okay, because that's encouraging. We have other Black women who think about her and say, gee, she did this, she did that. So you hear her name, and you automatically, I think you feel good.
Yes.
I mean, because when I hear her name, Viola, I always say, oh, I'm so connected to her, I'm so happy, right? Because it's just to know that this was a strong, thinking woman who kept her pride. Even though she might have had some psychological damage, I don't know why, as what happened, and she was embarrassed and upset, but she still stayed strong.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And unfortunately she left, but I can't help but think if she stayed, and what else could have happened.
That's right.
You know what? I just can only imagine what it would have been like. So I think the impact then was hard on her.
Yeah, I think about her voice and the fact that she bestowed, she authorized, she enabled voice for other Black women and Black men as well by creating that space for us to define beauty and Black as beauty. Black as beautiful. Now, some like myself, we see Viola Desmond as a symbol of African Canadian feminism and womanism. What do you believe Viola taught us about the significance of Black women leadership in our communities, and how have we learned the lesson?
Well, I hope that some of us probably have learned the lesson. Some of us are still debating what does that mean. But my bottom line, Black women can make excellent leaders. And I feel very strongly about that.
Yes.
And I believe that Viola has set that example of good leadership. And it's just unfortunate when you hear people talk about gender equity and this and that. It wasn't always included for Black women.
That's right.
Or
that's
they
right.
say that we're definitely going to make sure that we have a diverse workforce. It wasn't always with Black people. It was always with, oh, we have a lot of women working here now, but oh, is there any Black or brown women or Indigenous women in the group? No. People are thinking about it now.
Yes.
But I think when you have, I think there are Black women are, from people I know and the people that I know are coming up in young ages, very, very smart. Very, very smart. And I'm
Brilliant.
like, ooh, you know, because I'm going to be interviewed by a 13-year-old.
Wow.
I can't wait. You know, I'm kind of nervous about it. What if I can't answer her questions? But I think that's so exciting that she's going to interview me at 13 years old. And that is great. This is a black child. She's brilliant. She writes poetry. She sings. She's 13.
Awesome.
She's black.
Awesome. Yes.
So there you go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Viola was a change agent in her time, but how does her legacy continue to inspire us today? You're telling us, you've told us about various different persons who've been influenced by Viola Desmond, and you mentioned earlier, and maybe you can expound a little bit more on that in terms of the fact that she's going to be installed into the Business Hall of Fame in 2021. But how does her legacy continue to inspire change and to break down barriers today?
Well, it has already started, because here she is going to be inducted into the Business Hall of Fame. I mean, that's amazing. You know, she's a black female Nova Scotian, right? And, you know, she's going to be inducted into that Hall of Fame. That sets her there as a role model. Again, I mean, she's a role model on many levels.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this is something else, too, right? And people will continue talking about her. Then she's a role model on a $10 bill.
That's right.
Okay, just as she's the other than Her Majesty, she's really the first woman, you know, to be on a bill, and it's a $10 bill. So, and that $10 bill goes around the world.
That's right.
So the first thing people are going to do, well, who is this woman? So they're going to start looking at her and doing the history about her, and she's going to be influencing many people. And then you're going to have people who are going to be inspired to either be a businesswoman, get into maybe the beautician area, or education, real estate, because she also did real estate. You know, so there's so many ways that she could inspire people. Just having her courage, just being a social justice person. So you can have somebody who says, I'm fighting for the environment, I'm fighting for people who are disabled, I'm fighting for, you know. So she, I think, can influence many people. And she is going to be the legacy forever, because she has coins named after her. She has a ferry named after her. She, as I said, the $10 bill. There's just so much, and I can't remember everything, but I know she has lots of things named after her. And even when people see her pictures, they're curious, right? And so she's around forever.
She is.
She's
she
around
is.
forever.
And I pray that she will inspire us forever.
I think she will.
I think about her powerful voice, and when I speak about voice, I'm not only speaking about the ability, just the ability to speak, but about, again, her resistance, her voice as a change agent, her voice as you know, through the cause of agency and against systemic anti-Black discrimination specifically. Who needs to know, who needs to hear Viola Desmond's story?
Everybody.
Exactly.
We're not just talking about Black people, everybody needs to hear that story.
Yes.
And when I mentioned to you before about in the apology from the Premier at the time, said she's a Canadian hero. And she is.
She is.
She is, because everybody can learn from her. Whether you're a man, whether you're a Black woman, a white woman, a brown woman, Indigenous, a child, there's so much about her that we can all learn from. Because even as I read about her, I'm saying, oh, I didn't realize that. And, you know, because if she was doing this back in the 30s, I mean, you know, it still fits for today, for 2020.
Yes,
right?
it does.
Over 70 years. So she's just a phenomenal woman. She's nonstop, and she will be talked about forever. She will be.
She will be.
Yeah.
So what is her spirit saying to us today? What is Viola's spirit telling us, advising us today? That's my final question.
Well, I'm going to read something out of here too, but I think that her spirit is telling us today, you have the opportunity. Because there were other things that she wouldn't have had back then, but we have it now. So I think she would say, take advantage of it and go forward. And go forward being very proud, and stay united as a good group of people and help one another. You know what I mean? Help one another, regardless of, even if they help us in a small way, whether it's by mentoring somebody or whether it's saying, look, I could financially help you with this, or you're doing it behind the scenes. But be there and promote people, promote them. You know, and I see that as her spirit. I really do. And I think that's such a positive example of what you can do for your own people, but also for everybody.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because you're trying to bring a society where it's a society of everybody's welcome. Everybody's treated with respect. And from what I read about her, that's what she was. She was calm through everything. And she was very respectful. And even when she was in jail, you know, she was still sitting there with her clothes up reading or whatever. She was, you know what I'm saying? So she was one of these people that is a very, very, she was what I call, I'm not going to say perfect, but she's somebody who demonstrates that you can be God's child. Because I really do feel that if you believe that, then you know that you are a perfect person in many ways, right?
Yes,
that God is your supporter. I just want to read a little piece here that I wrote when I gave her the Royal Prerogative of Mercy, and it's just basically about her history. So do you mind if I read it?
No, go ahead,
and it's written in
please.
the book, written by her sister.
Thank you
And
for sharing.
it's the appendix, and it says, though much has been written about Viola, much more is yet to come. As we witness history unfold today in this very chamber, it is incumbent upon each of us to ensure its lessons are not forgotten. The undeniable link between the Lieutenant Governor and Government House, given the historic use of the Royal Prerogative of Mercy, and Viola Desmond is hard to ignore. The connection to the Crown, as well as the bravery of the government and the people of Nova Scotia to atone for past wrongdoings, must be preserved for future generations. It must live on in perpetuity as confirmation of a new era of inclusiveness in Nova Scotia, and so that history is never repeated. In the words of Nelson Mandela, there is no easy walk to freedom anywhere, and many of us will have to pass through the valley of the shadow of death again and again before we reach the mountaintop of our desires.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
What a woman Viola Desmond was. A woman of courage, a woman of wisdom.
A woman of faith, too.
A woman of faith, a community-minded woman. She was concerned about reaching others and not only concerned about herself, a selfless woman, a woman of purpose, a woman who affirmed others, particularly people of African descent, African Nova Scotians and others, through her work. And I can just hear echoing in my mind two titles of Maya Angelou's poems, two poems. Phenomenal woman.
Absolutely.
You know, she was a phenomenal woman. And in spite of what happened to her in 1946, I just hear her spirit saying, still I rise. Still I rise.
And she still is rising.
She's rising. She's rising in our hearts, in our spirits, in our minds. And
absolutely.
Thank you for joining me tonight. And
thank you for having me.
It's been my pleasure. It's been an honor. And for all of you joining us, I hope that it's been an honor for you and a privilege for you, and that you've learned something about Viola Desmond this evening. And we ask you to continue that learning journey and to take on the role of Viola Desmond as the lifelong learner, the social justice champion, the agent for change, the courageous person that she was. Thank you once again, and have a wonderful evening.